On today's episode of the Cryptoverse, 3 years after Ross Ulbricht's arrest, judges re-examine the Silk Road case. TunnelBear is the simple VPN app that makes it easy to browse the web privately and enjoy a more open and secure internet experience. Try TunnelBear for free by checking out the link in the video description below. Hi there guys, and welcome to the latest episode of the Cryptoverse, your regular dose of news and commentary on Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies and blockchains. I'm your host, Chris Coney. So let's get into today's article. So today I've turned once again to bitcoin.com because I quite fancied looking into this article about the Silk Road case. It's 3 years on now, and it's appeal time for Ross Ulbricht's defense attorneys. So let's see what's happening with the case. So the article starts out by saying, on the 6th of October, after spending 3 years behind bars, Ross Ulbricht returned to a Manhattan courtroom to face a panel of judges who heard his defense team's appeal of the double life sentence that Ulbricht received over a year ago. Now the first bit I've highlighted here is that it says a 3-judge panel reviewed the arguments. Now I'm pleased that it's a 3-judge panel rather than being just one judge, as I believe that'll go a long way to reducing any possible bias that would come from a single judge. And that's often a pattern I see repeating itself, is that when there's bias in a case, it's because a single judge is allowed to preside on their own, and then their own personal biases have no challenges. Or at least if there's 3 of them, there's a possibility that if one of them is biased, one of the other 2 will point it out. So that's something I would hope would happen. Now the next bit I've highlighted here, it says, one compelling question that continually surfaces is how the Silk Road server was seized. And then it says the implications of the server seizure could change the tone of the case, with the defense suggesting that authorities violated Ulbricht's Fourth Amendment rights. Now this is specifically talking about the process that we used to actually enter the property where the server was and seize it, take possession of it. Now I'm not sure if Ross ran the server from his house or his home, but it says here that the appeal states there was a Fourth Amendment violation. Now since I'm from the UK, I'm not familiar with the Fourth Amendment, so I went over to a Wikipedia article here, which talks about the Fourth Amendment. And it says basically that a citizen should feel safe in their home. And if a government wants to search the property, your house or your home, they need to have a warrant and probable cause, right? So I guess in this case, Ross's defense team are arguing that there was no warrant or there was no probable cause. And it very much reminds me of the case that's going through the New Zealand, I think it's the High Court in New Zealand right now. It's the Kim.com case. And there's a big element in the case there that's similar to this. And it's that when, I think it was the New Zealand police and the SWAT team and whatever, when they raided Kim.com's mansion, I think the appeal is saying that that raid was also unlawful. And the reason this matters in a legal process is that you have to follow the process. Otherwise, the outcome becomes inviolated. If you made a mistake or you didn't follow due process earlier in the process, then the outcome becomes invalid. So if you get a conviction, but you didn't follow the process of law, that's why there's maybe a retrial or the conviction gets overturned, and that's why there's an appeals process, right? So it says the name of the defense attorney here is Joshua Drattel. And in the yellow highlight here, it says Drattel also detailed how the court denied the admittance of 2 expert witnesses, interesting, as well as the significant impact 2 rogue officers had on the investigation. Now where it says 2 rogue officers, if you're not familiar with the Silk Road case, this was where 2 of the FBI agents who were working on the Silk Road investigation, they turned out to be corrupt because they began extorting money from Silk Road. And I think here the appeal is arguing that this fact wasn't considered in its entirety when the original judgment was made. So if it were, that might have had a significant impact on the outcome. And I haven't highlighted this bit, but there's this bone of contention about why did Ross get a double life sentence? It says here, seems quite harsh, and a lot of people talk about like a double life sentence doesn't seem appropriate or proportionate to what he did. Right, now the bit in green that I've highlighted here, it says, many people feel Judge Catherine Forrest, who presided over last year's trial when Ross was actually convicted, showed extreme bias. It says the defense accuses Forrest, Catherine Forrest, the original judge, of using hearsay about alleged murders for hire to tarnish Ulbricht's character, but he never received charges for those alleged crimes. So, rewind to the original case. This is saying that this Catherine Forrest was receiving hearsay from the prosecution, I imagine, to say this site, Silk Road, it's got, drugs for sale on there in exchange for Bitcoin, and it's also got murder for hire, right, on there. But that still remains hearsay because he was never charged with those crimes. And I would assume the reason he was not charged with it is because they couldn't prove it, and that might be because it wasn't true. You can bet money that if there was sufficient evidence to support such a accusation, the prosecution would have gone for it. Because I would argue that, selling murder for hire is more serious than selling drugs. But the bottom line here is that this whole thing about accusing Ross of having murder for hire on his website, but not that he was contracting killers. This is another thing about the case. Ross was just running the site. He was just providing the platform where people were listing supposed illegal substances. But this whole thing of having hearsay to say, there was murder for hire on his website. Now that's a good strategy if you want to influence people to see Ross as someone who is evil. And that makes the judge more likely to rule against him or to punish him more harshly if their perception of the guy is that he's evil. And the way you might build up that kind of perception is by saying, well, he had murder for hire on his website. That would be one way to do it. And then the article actually ends down at the bottom here with a paragraph that says, Bitcoin.com has always rallied for Ross's cause. The team here believes vices do not constitute crimes, and that we hope Ross and millions of other incarcerated go free. However, the powers that be see things differently, and we encourage our readers to head over to freeross.org to look at Ulbricht's perspective on the case. Now, I've highlighted the team here believes vices do not constitute crimes because that seems like a principle to me. I suppose this is where there is two sides of the argument with regards to what we call illicit drugs like heroin and cocaine or whatever you want to call it. So if you assess these substances on, say, the scale of well-being, meaning do these substances, when you put them into a human body, do they nourish it? Do they empower it? Do they make it better? Do they make it perform better? The answer is no. They're destructive, right? However, what it boils down to is who has the right to dictate or who has the right to decide what substances goes into a human body. I would argue that it's the individual that has that decision-making power and is the only person that has that decision-making power. Whether they choose to do something destructive to themselves is up to them, which is a way of paraphrasing what it says here. Vices do not constitute crimes. So a vice is something that isn't good for you, but a crime is something that's written into law by a group of people that decide they have authority over you and decide that that behavior is not acceptable. But that violates a more fundamental principle of free will. You cannot impinge on the free will of an individual. If they decide with their free will to go and purchase some sort of substance or chemical and then put it into their body, no one has anything to say about that because it's their individual free will. Now, of course, that doesn't sit in isolation because there's provisos to that. That principle is self-contained. However, if that person then engages in certain behavior like theft to steal money to pay for the substances, well, now there's another behavior which is unacceptable, which is stealing from someone else. And that violates two other fundamental moral principles, which is it violates the non-aggression principle, because in order to steal from someone, you have to aggress against them. And secondly, to steal from someone, that's violating their free will, because the person you're stealing from, they haven't voluntarily given you that money. And oddly enough, none of these principles I'm talking about require any law. So the non-aggression principle, or the principle of not impinging on people's free will, these are very basic laws that can very loosely govern people's behavior and allow freedom beyond that. So this article ends with this 20-second clip of Lynn Ulbricht. And she's boiling the case down to what is at stake. The video is actually called Silk Road, What's at Stake? And she said, "This is bigger than Ross. It's bigger than a website. I think one website is by far less dangerous than the government trampling on our rule of law and our constitution." So thanks for watching, guys. If you liked this video, like it. If you disliked it, dislike it. Leave a comment below, give me some feedback, and get subscribed. Or even consider supporting me directly by going to cryptoversity.com/podcast and sending me a tip to the Bitcoin address on that page. If you'd like to support me financially without actually spending any money, then click on the Steam It button on that page and vote for this episode on the Steam It network. That will get me some cryptocurrency with you just clicking a button. If you'd like something physical in exchange for your donation, then head over to the Cryptoversity store and buy yourself a t-shirt or an iPhone case with the Cryptoversity branding on it. That kind of thing helps us out a lot. Or if you would like more structured information on Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies and blockchains, head over to the courses section and buy yourself an online course. But that's all for today, so until tomorrow and the next episode of the Cryptoverse, it's me, Chris Coney, saying bye for now.